I'm Roger Goodwin. Welcome to Johnston Seed Grow With Us. We're going to talk about the summer mineral program for your cow-calf operation and stocker program, and the importance about a summer mineral program, why it's important that you should do that. And we have Brayden Hawkins, our Sweetlix account manager, with us this morning, and to talk about some of these issues. Welcome, Brayden.
Thanks for having me on, Roger. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, forage quality during the late spring and summers at its highest. Why is it important to, on mineral supplements, why should people keep doing that in the summer months?
So, depending on when you're set to calve and everything, typically that early summer months is when we start seeing guys turn bulls out and things along those lines. So having proper stored mineral levels in your cattle is crucial to just, maximizing your reproductive success when it comes. And as we all know, conception rates and calving rates are the number one driver of profitability when we're looking at a cow-calf operation. So making sure your cattle are in a adequate position to perform reproductively is very crucial, and mineral supplementation is awfully important in making sure that your cattle in the best spot they are to succeed.
Okay, in the mineral program, during the summer months, I know everything's different. You've got cow-calf and you've got stocker cattle on grass. On mineral supplementation, do you feed, the cow-calf, do they feed a certain mineral, and stockers? Talk a little bit on that, on the difference, and not just feeding one mineral to stockers and cow-calf.
Sure. So, not just the difference in cow-calf and stocker. I think it's also important to keep in mind what forage they're running on and the quality and the quantity of that they have. Cow-calf producers, we typically see a 2-to-1 cow-phos ratio in a lot of those guys, especially as we work into some of those later summer months. Phosphorus levels in mature forages are a lot lower, so providing adequate amount of phosphorus in those cow-calf operations is important. So that's typically what we see on the cow-calf side of things, is a 2-to-1 ratio with maybe a little higher levels of trace mineral and vitamins, just because they do have really strong importance, again, on reproduction and overall health of those cows. And then when we switch over to the stocker side, and I think, and especially as more and more guys start to retain ownership of calves through the feeding phase and stuff, I think it's important that we maintain a strong mineral program for those stocker calves, because it's been proven time and time again, those calves that have adequate reserves of certain minerals and vitamins, they respond better to vaccines and antibiotics. They usually convert and grow better through the feeding phase, and then obviously the benefits on the rail follow all of that. On the stocker side of things, we do see not quite as high of phosphorus levels in a lot of operations, just to help with the cost aspect of it, but we also try to incorporate a lot more growth technologies, whether that's an ionophore or something along those lines. So there's a lot more options than a guy realized they have access to, but it's kind of one of those answers that there's no one size fits all when it comes to mineral supplementation. But those are some of the biggest differences between what a cow-calf producer is looking to supplement his cows with versus a stocker operator is looking to supplement with.
Okay, you mentioned there when you were talking about ionophores, and this is a question we get a lot. Can I feed like Rumensin to cows?
Sure.
When you're talking about ionophores.
Yep. And we do see a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of producers, but there are some producers that feed those ionophores to their mature cow herd, especially guys that are like developing heifers or things along those lines. Puberty is a function of weight and age, and the extra quarter pound of growth that we see you get out of supplementing Rumensin just helps them get to that heavier weight quicker, which in turn helps them get to puberty quicker. You can certainly feed it to a mature cow. So that is one option. It's just, you have to make it pencil into your budget and things along those lines. There are some palatability differences as well between Rumensin and Bovatec. So we see a lot of those guys that are feeding Bovatec on the stocker side of things. It's usually those stocker calves hit it a little harder up front, and for those guys that aren't holding on to them as long term, they like the fact that they hit the Bovatec harder on the front end because it's a little more palatable. They're seeing quicker, more immediate results, and that's important to them because they're not holding on to those cattle quite as long sometimes.
And another question we get a lot, we do a lot of producer meetings, and the difference between a macro and micro minerals in the livestock mineral.
Correct.
The difference in the importances of that.
So a lot of, so I guess it's important up front to talk about which ones are the macros. So your macros are phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, salt is technically considered one. Those are your main ones that you see in a lot of supplemental minerals, and all that means is that they're needed at higher levels. And then your micro minerals or your trace minerals, those are two interchangeable terms, include copper, iodine, manganese, selenium, zinc, just to name a few. They're needed in lower levels and are typically expressed in parts per million on like if you're looking at a mineral tag, your macros will be a percentage, and then your micros or your trace minerals will be in parts per millions, and then obviously your vitamins are in IUs. But that's one way to just see a tag and know which ones are which, is looking at the unit increments. But the difference between them in terms of what they do, they're actually very similar. They all drive and provide assistance in maintaining metabolic functions. They each have, I guess you could say that the trace minerals are a little more specific what they do. Like there's a really big driver in reproductive health and sperm quality when it comes to selenium, and then you're looking at phosphorus and calcium on the macro side. It's more important for like bone development and reproductive success. So while they're all trying to just make those cows body work better, they are specified, especially when you get down to that trace level, trace mineral level.
And we get into the summer months and we get into wet months, like for foot rot. People are wanting to add different things to mineral on foot rot, and on some of these minerals, we get that question a lot on they're adding extra iodine to the mineral, or feeding an iodine block versus a balanced mineral. What's your take on that, on those issues when they're trying to treat foot rot with a block or an iodized salt block or mineral? What's their best option?
So I certainly think to a certain point additional iodine is useful, but I think we can start adding that into some formulas at levels where it's no longer cost effective. I think there's a certain threshold, and I don't think there's one single number, but you start seeing some of those ridiculously high iodine amounts, and I don't think you're adding any additional benefits. And you also can run the risk of a small amount of toxicity if you're not careful on some of those by supplementing too much iodine. So iodine, specifically EDDI, is what a lot of people use, and back in the day kind of said it helps with foot rot, and it is an iodine source in some of these minerals, but it could help to a certain extent. But I think there's other practices that producers can do to also help alleviate some of those concerns in terms of certain antibiotic usage and just proper management techniques that will really reduce a lot of the risk of that type of stuff. So again, and this is anything in the cattle business, there's no silver bullet, and adding crazy amounts of iodine to a mineral if you've got a bad foot rot problem isn't going to cure it. So it's kind of a trick question, Roger.
Well, I threw you a curveball. And some of the other questions we get a lot of, you get my cattle won't eat mineral. What are some of the things they can do to help with that problem? We get that a lot. My cattle won't eat the mineral.
Sure. So I think the first thing that I ask producers to look at if they're feeding mineral is, are they supplementing any sort of extra salt? A lot of these loose minerals specifically already have additional levels of salt in it to help monitor the intake. So if you're supplementing a salt block or going back to the iodine blocks, I mean, those are still 94, 98% salt. So, I mean, if you're supplementing additional salt, that will really impact the amount of mineral that your cattle are eating. So I ask producers, okay, if you're not getting the consumption you want, let's back off the additional salt supplementation, because the minerals got what you need. And let's also look at where you're positioning your mineral feeders. If you're looking for additional consumption, let's maybe put them a little closer to water sources or loafing areas. And if you're looking for them to slow down, let's maybe look at moving them away. So you can really strategically place your mineral feeders or your mineral tub, or however you're providing those mineral nutrients. You can strategically place them in areas to help get the type of consumption that you want, as well as, adjusting stocking rates. So that's something to keep in mind.
Okay, and another part of that question too, we also get it, my cattle are eating too much mineral. What can they do? We hear that a lot about they're eating too much.
Well, I'm in the school of thought that I'd rather see them eat too much up front than not enough, because they are getting the nutrients that they need. But a lot of the times when I hear of overconsumption concerns, it's based off of the fact that, these cattle haven't had access to mineral in 6 months or ever potentially. So I do see a lot of times when you put these cattle, put mineral in front of them and they've never had it before, it's been a long time since they've had it, they're going to hit it harder up front. I mean, it's like sticking, molasses candy in with a kid. They're going to eat it really hard up front, and eventually they'll level off to appropriate consumption levels and appropriate intake. So I think that's important to recognize that it will take some time, if you haven't supplemented mineral in a long time or ever, to get consumption where you want, just because it's going to be new, and those cattle are going to try to acclimate to it, and they're going to hit it a little harder up front. I also see sometimes, especially in like spring when there's high moisture content in a lot of your standing grasses, sometimes those cattle are overconsume on mineral, just looking for some sort of dry matter intake. So that might be a potential cause as well. But usually I just say, hey, let them kind of level out on it and you'll get it to where you want it. And I know that's tough up front, especially with the cost of mineral, but patience is key. And I think that's a good point to make when it comes to promoting a year-round mineral program. You're going to see more consistent consumption because those cattle are going to have mineral in front of them 24/7, 365. So you're not going to see those spikes in intake and then level out, then take it away from them, spike in intake, level out. It's going to be consistent year-round if it's in front of them all the time.
Okay, thanks. And what are some of the things that make the Sweetlix minerals different from other options out there on the market?
So I think the biggest one is just the consistency and the palatability of our mineral. If you go to some of our plants across the United States, our personnel at those manufacturing locations is top notch. They've been there a long time. They've been manufacturing and making this mineral for a lot of years, so they know what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to smell like, and there's something to be said for that when it comes to generating consistent results year in, year out. Something else I think is just the diversity of products that we have. Like we talked about a little while ago, there's no one size fit all when it comes to mineral supplementation. Different cow-calf producers, whether they're looking for a little higher performance, might need a 100% organic trace mineral program, which falls under our blueprint line, or maybe some stalker guys is looking for something with Bovatech in it, or maybe something that's medicated with CTC and fly control to help with the anaplasm. I mean, we have so many different options to kind of help you fit your production practices and to help match the time of year that you're in. So I think that's probably the other big one, is just the diversity of products we have to help every producer out there.
Okay, thanks. Where can people go to learn more about the Sweetlix Livestock supplement system? So
the first resource that I tell people to go look at is our website, which is www.sweetlix.com. It's an underutilized resource sometimes. I think there's a lot of good information on there, a lot of good articles that strictly pertain to mineral supplementation. So I would definitely go check those out. Our nutrition group is top notch. They do a fantastic job and issue a lot of really good articles. You can also reach out to your Sweetlix representative wherever you may be, and if you're in Johnston Seed Company's trade area, you can reach out to any of their staff. They are highly educated on cattle production in the Sweetlix brand, and they'll help you out and get you taken care of.
Well, thank you, Brayden, for your time today, for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and do this, and thank you for listening.
Appreciate you having me on, Roger. I enjoyed it.